Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's overlooked potential comes roaring to the surface, shocking every person in the room? That's exactly what happened on a stormy evening at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport. A weary crowd of travelers hustled across the marble floors, while tension crackled like static in the air. Rows of TSA officers were barking orders. A vexed pilot raced to his gate, and a single security guard had the nerve to publicly humiliate a black janitor named Darnell. Little did that security guard know, the janitor had a single ironclad trump card, and it came in the form of an unassuming keyring, one that opened every door in the airport. Lightning forked across the sky above Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, each spark followed by a rolling crescendo of thunder that rattled the towering windows overlooking the tarmac. The airport was no stranger to storms, especially in the unpredictable transitional months between late summer and early fall. But this particular night felt different. There was a certain undercurrent of tension humming in every corridor, as though the gathering storm outside was merely the backdrop to a greater, more human drama brewing within. Flights were being delayed, left and right lines at every counter looped around pillars. Exhausted, irritable passengers were huddled by gate monitors, staring at the flickering screens, announcing yet another revision to their departure times. The echo of airport announcements: Flight 283 to Chicago, Flight 149 to Newark, mixed with the hiss of rain on the roof. The combination lent a surreal, claustrophobic atmosphere. Darnell Reeves had seen it all before. He was a janitor at Hartsfield-Jackson, one of the busiest airports in the world, and his job had come to define him in ways both humbling and enlightening. Darnell knew this building like the back of his hand. He could navigate the labyrinth of hallways, terminal connections, and mechanical rooms blindfolded. In many ways, he was as much a pillar of the airport's operations as the ground crew and flight controllers. And yet, for all his reliability and quiet dedication, he remained invisible, often overlooked, rarely acknowledged, and even more rarely respected. On the night the storm hit, Darnell wore his standard airport-issued uniform and carried an overflowing ring of keys that jangled with each stride. The keys were his daily reminder of the responsibility he held. They opened closets of cleaning supplies, break rooms, locked stairwells leading down to the underbelly of the airport, and control panels in the mechanical rooms. Each key represented a crucial function, or a hidden space symbols of a trust the airport had placed in him over the past 15 years. He walked methodically, water dripping off his uniform's hem, every time he stepped back from the clanging bucket of cleaning tools. If only others could see him for who he was, he sometimes thought. But such was the nature of his job. For the most part, Darnell found peace in the solitude of mopping floors, taking comfort in the rhythmic movements and the knowledge that he was helping keep the airport running smoothly. That night, trouble appeared in the form of Carter Mitchell, a newly hired security guard, still brimming with the swagger of a man who believed he had everything under control. Carter was tall, broad-shouldered, and possessed of an overconfident smirk that seemed permanently etched across his face. He liked to bark orders at passengers, brandish his flashlight like a baton, and speak in clipped tones as though he were an army drill sergeant. He was scanning the faces of passengers, mired in the long lines, occasionally stepping forward to hiss, "No cutting in line." Or I said, "Keep it moving, folks." To him, each traveler was a potential suspect, each black bag a potential threat. That vigilance, when tempered with humility, was valuable. But Carter had minimal humility. Carter first spotted Darnell while the latter was mopping a particularly troublesome spill of coffee near the entrance to Terminal B. The janitor's calm, practiced motions struck Carter as too leisurely for the chaos whirling around them. While travelers were scrambling, toddlers were crying, staff were dashing about, there was Darnell quietly swirling his mop. "Hey, Carter," snapped, pointing with his flashlight. "You, yes, you. Move out of the way. You're clogging up the path." Darnell looked up, perplexed. He made sure his bucket was tucked out of the main flow of foot traffic. "I'm sorry, sir," he said politely, "but I have to clean this spill. Somebody could slip and fall. It'll be just another moment." Carter wrinkled his nose. "Then be quick about it. You're holding up the line." Passengers who had been slowed by the spectacle tried to offer Darnell a wordless nod of understanding. Most of them recognized that the janitor was simply doing his job. But Carter wouldn't let it go. He planted himself beside Darnell, arms folded, glowering. "And put that big ring of keys away," he added, ignoring the fact that a janitor naturally had to carry them. "You're distracting people." Darnell, who had dealt with worse forms of condescension in his life, forced a polite smile and simply said, "I'll be done in a moment, sir." It might have ended there, if not for the chain of events about to unfold. Once Darnell finished cleaning the spill, he wheeled his bucket down a side hallway, leading to a staff-only area. He was halfway through the corridor when he heard footsteps echo behind him. Glancing over his shoulder, he caught sight of Carter Mitchell tailing him, wearing a stern expression. Something about the situation prickled the hairs on the back of Darnell's neck. He couldn't recall a single instance in which a security guard had followed him so intently. In fact, airport security usually knew all the janitors they worked in tandem for years at a time. But Carter was new, inexperienced, and apparently already on a power trip. "Where do you think you're going?" Carter asked as soon as he caught up, voice brimming with authority. Darnell paused, his brow furrowing. "I'm going to refill my cleaning supplies," he answered. "There's a maintenance closet at the end of this corridor." "Well, I don't recognize you," Carter snapped. "Let me see some ID." With a muted sigh, Darnell fished out his employee badge from his shirt pocket and handed it over. Carter scrutinized the photo, checking it against Darnell's face with exaggerated deliberation. Finally, Carter shoved the badge back into Darnell's hand. "Okay, you check out," Carter muttered. But his posture remained taut, and his gaze flicked down to the ring of keys. "What's with all these keys?" Darnell raised an eyebrow. "I'm a janitor," he repeated, as though that explained everything. The ring was huge, nearly 3 dozen keys, and he needed them for the wide variety of locks throughout the sprawling terminals. Carter snorted. "Well, I don't need you sneaking off into unauthorized areas. You hear me? Don't be wandering around looking suspicious." Hurt flashed across Darnell's face, but he managed to keep his composure. "I have the keys to these areas because my job requires it," he said calmly. "You're welcome to confirm with facilities or my supervisor, Ms. Jenkins. She's in Terminal C's administrative office." Carter gave a curt nod, turning on his heel. As he strode away, he gave a last, withering glare over his shoulder as if to say, "I've got my eye on you." Word travels fast in an airport, especially among those who live and breathe the place for over a decade. It didn't take long for the other janitors, security personnel, and airline staff to become aware that Carter Mitchell was giving Darnell a hard time. Some shrugged it off as typical new guy intimidation that would fizzle out once Carter settled in. Others wondered if Carter's attitude had deeper roots, racial prejudices perhaps, or an insatiable thirst for power that thrived on belittling others. It was a particularly busy night. A series of delays triggered gate changes, baggage mishaps, and a minor meltdown at the check-in desks. With storm clouds still swirling overhead, the terminal lighting flickered ominously, as if foreshadowing even greater trouble. Darnell found himself triple-checking all the supply closets, ensuring the floors were safe and dry amidst the frantic footsteps. At one point, as he made his way past a line of weary passengers, he caught snippets of their conversations. "Been stuck here for 4 hours. Can't believe they cancelled my flight. They said they'll update us in 2 hours, but who knows?" It was the kind of chaos that put everyone on edge. Travelers, staff, even the most seasoned flight crews. Yet in the swirling chaos, Darnell maintained his cool. After years of dealing with all sorts of airport fiascos, from mechanical issues that grounded planes for days to bomb threats that cleared entire terminals, he had learned one major lesson. Keep your head down, do your work diligently, and stand ready for when your job matters most. Little did he know that lesson was about to prove itself in spades. Later that evening, near midnight, Terminal C was nearly packed with stranded travelers. The lights buzzed overhead, and every seat in the waiting area was occupied. People sprawled along walls with their cell phones, some napping, others glaring at monitors. Tension had reached a fever pitch. Carter stood near the boarding gate, arms folded, scanning the crowd. He moved in short, deliberate paces as though he were patrolling a prison yard. When he noticed Darnell approaching, keys jangling, he straightened his lips, drawing into a thin line. The janitor was coming to empty the trash cans and wipe down a cluster of seats that had been stained by spilled soda. Darnell kept his eyes down, not wanting a repeat of earlier. However, Carter seemed determined to escalate. The guard marched up behind him as the janitor began cleaning the seats. "I thought I told you to keep out of the way," Carter said, voice low. "You think I'm joking around? You can't just roam wherever you please." Darnell paused mid-wipe. A small group of onlookers began to watch. There was nowhere else for them to look, stuck as they were in the terminal. So Darnell began choosing his words with care. "This is my station. Part of my job is to keep these seats clean." Carter's expression darkened. "You've got one job," he snapped. "And you're doing it slowly. Get out of here or I'll—" "You'll what?" came a new voice. It belonged to Ms. Jenkins, Darnell's supervisor. She stepped into the circle, arms folded, glaring at Carter. She was a short woman in her 50s, but her presence was formidable. She had the authoritative stance of someone who had navigated airport bureaucracy for years. Carter blinked. He was clearly surprised by her interruption, but quickly composed himself. "I'm trying to ensure the area is secure," he stammered. "He's messing around." Ms. Jenkins pointed at Carter. "This man, Darnell Reeves, is my best janitor. He's doing exactly what he's paid to do, helping maintain cleanliness in this terminal, which, by the way, is crucial for passenger safety and comfort. If you have a problem, I suggest you take it up with me." Before Carter could respond, Ms. Jenkins turned to Darnell. "You're doing a fine job, Darnell. Thank you for your service. If anyone needs to speak to you, they can come through me." Darnell felt a wave of gratitude mixed with relief. If Ms. Jenkins was aware of the conflict, perhaps the issue would be resolved. Yet Carter's furious eyes said otherwise. That night, though, Ms. Jenkins's intervention caused Carter to back off publicly. The security guard's resentment burned hotter. He saw Ms. Jenkins's reprimand as an insult to his authority. But more than that, he saw Darnell's calm demeanor as a personal affront. In Carter's mind, the janitor's quiet presence was a challenge, a direct question of who truly had the power. As the storm raged on and the hours crawled, Carter began to plot ways to reassert his dominance. He convinced himself that Darnell needed to be taught a lesson in respect. Something about seeing a black man carry a large set of keys wearing a uniform with calm confidence rankled him more than he cared to admit. Deep down, he likely felt threatened. Perhaps it was the knowledge that many staff, including Ms. Jenkins, deeply respected Darnell. Perhaps it was the fact that Darnell had the literal keys to every nook and cranny of the airport. Or maybe Carter's prejudice, unacknowledged but present, fueled his determination to put Darnell in his place. Carter began asking around, subtly probing other staff about what Darnell did during his shifts, where he went, which doors he unlocked. Most colleagues found Carter's questioning strange and off-putting. Many suspected his motives were impure, though no one could pinpoint exactly how Carter planned to act on his grudge. Darnell, meanwhile, went about his duties unaware of how far Carter's resentment had grown. The janitor remained focused on finishing the night's shifts with his usual thoroughness. If anything, Ms. Jenkins' defense bolstered his sense of security. He believed, perhaps naively, that formal authority would keep Carter from continuing his harassment. He was wrong. Days passed. Storm clouds came and went, flights resumed their usual churn, and the airport returned to its standard bustle. Yet tension lingered in the air like the residue of a bad dream. One afternoon, as the midday sun poured through the tall windows of Terminal A, Darnell was finishing his lunch break in the employee cafeteria located in a back corridor off the main terminal. He liked this small dining area because it offered a brief respite from the constant noise of gates and announcements. He was rinsing out his coffee thermos at the sink when Carter strode in uniform, crisp eyes, burning with what could only be described as triumph. Darnell Reeves. Carter's voice carried an edge that made heads turn. Darnell slowly faced him, wiping his hands on a paper towel. Yes. Carter held up a small black object between his thumb and index finger. It was a phone charger. Do you recognize this? Perplexed, Darnell shook his head. No. I can't say I do. Carter smirked. Strange, because I found it in a restricted mechanical room down in the basement level near Terminal B, a room that only certain staff have keys to. I also found evidence someone had tampered with the locked cabinet of electrical supplies. He paused, letting the insinuation sink in. Of course, the lock wasn't forced. Whoever did it must have had a key. So I asked around. Only a handful of employees have that specific key. And guess who's on that list? A few nearby employees murmured uneasily. Darnell felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. I have that key, yes, but I haven't been down there in days. Why would I need to? Also, that phone charger isn't mine. Carter shrugged, raising his eyebrows. Is that so? Well, I guess we'll have to see what security footage shows. In the meantime, maybe think twice about creeping around areas you're not supposed to be in. Darnell's confusion shifted to indignation. My job requires me to access locked areas for cleaning and maintenance, he retorted. I'm not creeping around anywhere, and I didn't break into anything. Carter feigned a sad smile. We'll let the higher-ups decide. Just know I'm watching you. With that, Carter pivoted and left, leaving a swirl of whispered speculation in his wake. Darnell stood frozen, heart pounding. He knew Carter's accusation was baseless, but the guard had laid out a scenario in which Darnell would be the prime suspect if anything truly were missing or tampered with. He understood all too well the power of innuendo. If Carter's claims gained traction, it could jeopardize Darnell's job of 15 years and the quiet dignity he'd built his life upon. Ms. Jenkins wasted no time. As soon as word of Carter's accusation reached her, She called Darnell into her office. It was a cramped space near the administrative section of Terminal C, lined with filing cabinets and battered by the hum of overhead fluorescent lights. Darnell felt a wave of relief upon entering, knowing she would give him a fair hearing. Ms. Jenkins gestured for him to sit. "I've been made aware of Carter Mitchell's claims." She began lacing her fingers. "He's apparently told others he has evidence. You've been somewhere. You shouldn't be tampered with supplies and left behind a phone charger." Darnell shook his head, exasperated. "It's ridiculous. I can't even remember the last time I was in that mechanical room. Probably 2 weeks ago, cleaning up a minor water leak. And that phone charger isn't mine." Ms. Jenkins sighed. "I believe you. Unfortunately, Carter filed a formal report with the Chief of Security. Now we'll have to go through the official processes, reviewing video footage, checking logs. You know the drill. It's not ideal, but I have already told them your record is spotless. I have no doubt you'll be cleared." "But why would he do this?" Darnell asked, frustration creeping into his voice. "I can't understand the man's motive." Ms. Jenkins pursed her lips. "I've heard talk that he may have some biases, or that he feels threatened by your position. I can't say for sure. But rest assured, I'll make sure this is handled properly." Over the next few days, an investigation commenced. Darnell was asked to provide statements, detail his whereabouts, and confirm which keys he had used. The mechanical room logs showed no sign of his entry for over a week, consistent with his explanation. Moreover, the phone charger that Carter had dangled as proof turned out to be registered to some random flight mechanic who had lost it months ago. There was no direct link to Darnell whatsoever. While the investigation gradually erased Carter's false narrative, it did nothing to soothe the tension now humming between them. The guard retreated from direct confrontation, but an icy hostility replaced his initial aggression. Each time they crossed paths, Carter's glare was enough to set Darnell's teeth on edge. Cleared of any wrongdoing, Darnell tried to refocus on his work. With the storm threats subsiding, the airport returned to its usual mania. Big families traveling for the weekend, business people rushing between gates, tourists hauling souvenirs from the shops. The churn was perpetual. By now, Darnell had become something of a sympathetic figure among the airport staff. Word of Carter's baseless accusation spread, and many employees went out of their way to greet Darnell warmly or stand by him publicly. They'd say, "Hey Darnell, how's the shift?" or "Don't let that new guard get you down." Flight attendants, technicians and older security personnel all offered nods and smiles. For someone who'd spent so many years overlooked the support was a rare and touching experience. But with the positive also came a heavy realization. If Carter was willing to go that far, once what would stop him from trying again? How many times could Darnell prove his innocence before the negativity took a toll? Late one evening, after finishing a particularly long shift, Darnell leaned against a floor-to-ceiling window, facing the tarmac. The night sky stretched endlessly, dotted with the blinking lights of distant planes. He took a moment to reflect, letting the hum of the terminal wash over him. He thought about all the nights he'd spent here, quietly cleaning after thousands of people had passed through, ensuring the floors were safe, the bathrooms stocked, the trash emptied. He considered the pride he felt whenever a supervisor praised his thoroughness. He remembered the time he'd found a lost child crying in a janitor's closet, how he'd comforted her and safely reunited her with her frantic parents. In those moments, it felt as though the job's worth was measured in intangible acts of kindness that went unseen by most. Now, with Carter's unwarranted hostility hanging over him, Darnell realized he had reached a personal crossroads. He could continue to keep his head down, hoping that the guard's aggression would fizzle out. Or he could stand his ground, ensuring that Carter and anyone like him understood that a janitor was not someone to be disrespected, especially not a black man who had spent his life working to maintain dignity in a world that often tried to strip it away. Quietly, Darnell promised himself that he would remain steadfast. He would keep doing his job with excellence, but he would also not allow Carter's intimidation to break his spirit. It happened on a Sunday, a day usually marked by families traveling for leisurely vacations. But on this particular Sunday, chaos erupted in Terminal D. A sudden mechanical failure in the main power grid caused partial blackouts. Lights flickered, conveyor belts stalled, and the air conditioning unit shut down. Within minutes, the temperature in that section of the airport climbed uncomfortably high. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing technical difficulties," crackled a halting announcement over the intercom before cutting off mid-sentence. Passengers began to panic. The lines grew chaotic and some monitors went blank. Luggage started piling up in the corridors because the baggage carousels wouldn't spin. Everyone from electricians to IT specialists scrambled to isolate the problem. Darnell was in Terminal C when he heard the news. With Ms. Jenkins' directive, the janitorial staff mobilized to provide water and direct frantic passengers to cooler areas. In an airport the size of Hartsfield-Jackson, an outage in one terminal could ripple across the entire facility, delaying flights everywhere. Among the crowd was Carter, who was posted near Terminal D's security checkpoint. He was barking orders at frantic passengers, trying to maintain control as the line system devolved into disarray. Tempers were flaring. A few travelers attempted to shove their way to the front, while others shouted for answers. The stale, warm air only heightened the tension. "Move back!" Carter shouted, arms extended to hold back the impatient crowd. "Form a single file line and wait for instructions." But with the monitors down and limited announcements, confusion reigned. Shouts and protests rang out. At that moment, a high-pitched alarm from somewhere in the bowels of the terminal blared, indicating an electrical system malfunction deeper than a mere blackout. Behind the scenes of every bustling airport is a hidden labyrinth of corridors, mechanical rooms, and storage spaces that keep operations running. Large, imposing circuit boxes hum with electricity, controlling everything from runway lights to escalators. In Terminal D, these circuit boxes were accessible only to specialized maintenance crews and those who had the keys. On that chaotic Sunday, the lead electrician, Jeff Morse, realized the meltdown was localized to a specific corridor behind the terminal's main lounge. However, that corridor's door had jammed. Time was running out, and temperatures inside Terminal D were rising with each passing minute. If they didn't stabilize the electricity soon, more systems might fail. Communications, security scanners, even emergency lighting. Amid the frenzy, Ms. Jenkins rushed toward the mechanical area cell phone in hand. She spotted Jeff Morse struggling with the jammed door. "We need Darnell," Ms. Jenkins exclaimed. "He has the master key. The older model locks sometimes jam, but his ring of keys includes an override." Jeff nodded frantically. "Where is he?" Ms. Jenkins scanned the surging mass of passengers. "He's handing out water near gate D12. I'll go get him." Within minutes, Ms. Jenkins located Darnell. His face shone with sweat in the stifling air, yet he was calmly distributing bottles to travelers, urging them to keep hydrated. The moment Ms. Jenkins beckoned him, Darnell handed off the water duties to another janitor and sprinted toward the jammed corridor. As Darnell was rushing past the security checkpoint, weaving through a frantic crowd, Carter spotted him. Immediately suspicion flared in the guard's eyes. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" Carter demanded, stepping into Darnell's path. Darnell tried to keep his voice steady. "I'm needed in the mechanical area behind Terminal D. The door is jammed. I have a key." Carter narrowed his eyes. "You again with your keys. Who gave you clearance to access that area?" Frustration coursed through Darnell, but time was too precious. "Ms. Jenkins. The lead electrician, Jeff Morse. They need my key." Carter took a step closer, his posture aggressive, blocking the corridor. "I haven't heard any order about that. Stay where you are until I verify." "People are in trouble." Darnell snapped, anger finally surfacing. "We could lose power to half the terminal if that meltdown spreads." Passengers jostled around them, the sweltering heat mounting. Ms. Jenkins, coming up behind, shouted, "Carter, let him through, this is an emergency." But Carter folded his arms, glaring at Darnell. He seemed more determined than ever to assert his power. "I don't take orders from a janitor," he said coldly. "Take them from me," Ms. Jenkins retorted out of breath. She whipped out her ID badge, practically thrusting it into Carter's face. "I am the head of janitorial operations for Hartsfield-Jackson. The lead electrician has specifically requested Darnell. Are you trying to endanger the airport?" Momentarily confused by the chaos, Carter stepped aside, though his resentment blazed. Darnell wasted no time rushing past him, keys rattling. Ms. Jenkins followed closely, and Carter shot them both a look that promised further confrontation. The corridor leading to the mechanical room was dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. The temperature was even more stifling here, the stuffy air carrying the acrid scent of overheated electronics. Jeff Morse and a small team of electricians stood clustered around the jammed door. "It's locked from the inside somehow," Jeff explained. "We can't get in to reset the breakers or check for a short circuit. If we don't get inside, soon the system might overload, and we could have a fire." Darnell quickly searched his ring of keys. He had memorized each key by touch alone, but he checked carefully under the flickering light. Finally, he selected a silver key with a tiny red marking, an older override key rarely used. He inserted the key into the corroded lock. It stuck for a moment, but after a firm twist, the mechanism clicked. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a tangled maze of cables and circuit panels beyond. Jeff and his team wasted no time rushing inside. Darnell held the door, shining a flashlight across the panels. Sparks danced along a fuse box, and the air smelled like burnt plastic. The electricians immediately began flipping switches, removing covers and testing circuits. Ms. Jenkins hovered at the threshold, sweat beading along her temples. "Darnell, can you stay here? We might need to access the other panels on the far side if they're locked. You have the keys for those, too." "Of course," he said. "Anything you need." In those tense moments, the airport's usual hustle seemed to fade, replaced by the pulse of potential disaster. Darnell recognized the significance of this job. If the meltdown spread, the entire terminal might go dark, stranding thousands and costing the airport millions. Every second counted. Carter was nowhere in sight. Darnell felt a spark of relief that he didn't have to navigate the guards' interference while dealing with this crisis. For the first time that day, his focus was solely on the task at hand, using his keys to open the locked cabinets so the electricians could stabilize the system. Minutes blurred together. The electricians discovered that a critical power junction had overheated, threatening to trip the main circuit. If that happened, everything in Terminal D, from lights to security scanners, would go down. The team needed to reroute power through backup systems, but the old wiring was notoriously tricky. Periodically, Jeff would call out, "Darnell, we need the panel on the west wall unlocked," or "Darnell, check if the supply closet on this floor has extra cooling fans." Each request was urgent, and each time Darnell's ring of keys was the ultimate asset. He would dash across the corridor, unlock the next box or room, and facilitate the repair. Ms. Jenkins and a few other staff members delivered water and basic tools. But it was Darnell's keys that granted true access. The hum of machinery and the sizzle of frayed wiring provided a soundtrack of tension. At one point, a small spark jumped from a circuit, causing one electrician to shout and stumble backward, the air filled with the metallic tang of ozone. "Careful," Jeff barked. "We're dealing with some serious voltage here." Each locked door they opened revealed more layers of the terminal's infrastructure stuff most travelers would never see. And each time Darnell's expertise shone. He'd point out hidden latches, pass keys to the exact staffer who needed them, and maintain a calm presence despite the swirling crisis. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the circuits were stabilized. A faint hum signaled that the reroute was complete, and the backup cooling fans whirred to life, slowly bringing the temperature down. The immediate danger passed. A wave of relief washed over the group. Jeff wiped sweat from his forehead, shooting Darnell a grateful nod. "We couldn't have done it so quickly without you, man." "Thank you." Darnell offered a weary smile. "Just glad I could help." Word spread quickly that a blackout disaster in Terminal D had been averted, thanks in large part to the janitor who held the keys. As power returned and the temperature dropped, passengers noticed staff emerging from the maintenance corridors, exchanging congratulatory pats on the back. Some travelers overheard the story, learning that a quiet, unassuming janitor named Darnell had played a pivotal role in preventing a terminal shutdown. Meanwhile, Carter stood near the security checkpoint, jaw clenched. He had been stuck trying to control the crowd while the meltdown was addressed behind the scenes. When he heard from a passing staffer that Darnell really saved the day, his scowl deepened. "This is absurd," Carter muttered to himself. "He's just a janitor." But Carter's muttering did nothing to change the outpouring of appreciation. Ms. Jenkins insisted that management be notified of Darnell's vital contribution. She even wrote an official commendation praising his quick actions and valuable insight into the airport's hidden infrastructure. A few days later, airport management decided to hold a small ceremony in the staff lounge to publicly acknowledge everyone involved in averting the crisis. The invitation specifically mentioned Darnell's role. It was the kind of recognition rarely if ever bestowed upon janitorial staff. For Darnell, it felt surreal. He'd never sought the spotlight, never asked for fanfare. But the experience of stepping up when disaster threatened and finally being recognized for his indispensable knowledge filled him with quiet pride. The following week, a modest gathering formed in the staff lounge. The airport manager, Mr. Gerald Hawkins, stood before a podium with Ms. Jenkins at his side. A small crowd had assembled, including electricians, flight attendants, baggage handlers, security officers, and various administrative personnel. Darnell waited at the edge, trying not to draw attention to himself. Mr. Hawkins cleared his throat and addressed the room. "We're here today to honor the team that prevented a major power failure in Terminal D. Their quick thinking and thorough knowledge of our infrastructure ensured that thousands of travelers were not stranded in the dark. We owe them our gratitude." He read through names highlighting contributions: Jeff Morse for diagnosing the electrical malfunction, Ms. Jenkins for coordinating staff, and so on. Then came the moment that made Darnell's heart thump. I'd also like to give special thanks to one individual whose keys and expertise proved essential in accessing all those locked panels and corridors, Hawkins said with a smile. Without him, our team couldn't have worked as fast as they did. He's a long-time member of our airport family, and it's high time we acknowledge him properly. He beckoned Darnell forward. The janitor, heart pounding, stepped to the front. Applause broke out, some of it polite, some of it quite enthusiastic. He spotted Ms. Jenkins beaming with pride. Even Jeff Morse, typically stoic, was clapping vigorously. Mr. Hawkins handed Darnell a small plaque with the airport's logo. The inscription read, "In recognition of outstanding service and dedication during the terminal power emergency." For a moment, Darnell stood speechless. He had never been singled out for an award in his entire career. The crowd's applause felt like a warm tide washing away years of being invisible. Yet as he scanned the room, his eyes found Carter standing near the back, with arms folded, face tight. A flicker of tension passed through Darnell's chest. He knew the guard wouldn't celebrate his success. But this time, Carter's disapproval didn't matter. The intangible barrier of invisibility that Darnell had navigated for so long was breaking. In this moment, he felt seen. Despite the ceremony, Carter's hostility only grew. He'd lost face when Miss Jenkins had intervened, and now the entire airport was buzzing with praise for Darnell. People who once overlooked the quiet janitor were suddenly acknowledging him as a hero. Carter hated it. His frustration boiled over one evening when he encountered Darnell in a quiet corridor. The janitor was examining a busted floor tile, kneeling with a small flashlight to assess the extent of the damage. Carter stepped forward, leaning in. "So they gave you a plaque," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "You must feel real important now." Darnell didn't rise to the provocation. He stood, placing his flashlight in a pocket. "It's not about feeling important." "I was just doing my job," he said quietly. "If you'll excuse me, I need to get facilities to repair this tile." Carter let out a mirthless laugh. "You think you're so special because you have a set of keys? Let me tell you something. I've seen plenty of guys like you strolling around acting like they own the place just because they do the dirty work. It's pathetic." Darnell felt a stab of anger. He clenched his jaw, striving for control. "I don't claim to own anything, Carter. I just do the best I can. And yes, I've worked here a long time, long enough to know how to access parts of the airport that maybe you haven't learned about yet." Carter's eyes flashed. "Don't think for a second that I won't be watching you. One slip-up, and I'll make sure you're out of here." With that threat, he turned and stormed away, leaving Darnell's heart pounding. Not long after the near blackout crisis, another emergency befell the airport, a security threat. A suitcase left unattended in the check-in area triggered alarms and a partial evacuation of Terminal A. In the high-alert climate of modern travel, any hint of a security breach was taken extremely seriously. Teams of TSA officers and security personnel swarmed the area, establishing barricades. Carter was among them, finally in his element, dealing with a tangible security threat. He directed evacuees, questioned witnesses, and searched for the owner of the suspicious suitcase. Passengers were ushered out of Terminal A, but the chaos spilled over into adjoining terminals, including where Darnell was working. He found himself stuck in the crowd, herded away from the main corridor. In the confusion, Ms. Jenkins and other staff were separated. Suddenly, an announcement blared. "Attention all personnel. Due to a security threat, do not allow anyone to enter or exit Terminal A until further notice. We have a possible explosive device. Proceed with evacuation procedures." The thick press of bodies made movement difficult. People were shouting in confusion. Airport staff tried to calm them, but fear was contagious. Darnell scanned the area, looking for an open path or any staff he could assist. Then, over the sea of heads, he saw Carter. The guard was standing near a cordoned-off entrance, speaking into a walkie-talkie. A group of anxious travelers, some with children, pleaded to be let through to retrieve their baggage or find loved ones. Carter was refusing, rightfully given the instructions. But the standoff was in flaming tempers. With no immediate cleaning duties required in this moment of crisis, Darnell made a judgment call. He stepped toward the crowd, offering to assist in guiding them away from the threat area. If this possible explosive device turned out to be real, they needed an orderly evacuation, not a frantic stampede. As Darnell approached, Carter spotted him. Immediately suspicion flared. "You again," he growled. "Back off. We're in the middle of an emergency." Darnell kept his voice calm. "That's why I'm here. I might be able to help keep people organized. We need to get them away from Terminal A as quickly as possible." Carter glared. "I don't need your help." The crowd's anxiety was escalating, fueling the risk of panic. Children were crying, older passengers looking faint. A TSA officer, clearly overwhelmed, stepped forward. "We can't get everyone out through this corridor. The main route is blocked, and we need a second path." Darnell realized there was another route, an old access hallway that bypassed Terminal A's check-in area. It was rarely used and typically locked. He glanced at his keyring. One of those keys might open that hallway. He raised his voice so the TSA officer could hear. "There's an alternate corridor near the baggage offices behind Gate A4. It connects to Terminal B without going near the threat area. I can open it if we get people to line up behind me." Carter's eyes widened clearly, not liking that Darnell had a solution. But the TSA officer seized on the idea. "That's perfect. Let's do it." Time was critical. The alarm klaxon still blared, echoing off the high ceilings. People needed direction, any sign of leadership to keep them calm. Carter looked caught in a dilemma. He had strict instructions not to let anyone move, but the TSA officer now had a potential safe route. "Fine." Carter finally spat. "You want to help? Then do it. But if anything goes wrong, it's on you." Darnell nodded, ignoring Carter's hostility. He turned to the nervous crowd. "Please follow me. We have an alternate path. Stay calm, single file. We'll get everyone out safely." His firm, soothing tone cut through the panic. Parents huddled their children close, and the group began to move toward Gate A4. At Gate A4, the group found the locked access hallway. A large sign read, "Staff only restricted." Darnell tested a few keys before he found the correct one. With a metallic click, the door swung open. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, revealing a narrow corridor that sloped downward. The smell of detergent and old tile lingered, evidence that it was mostly used by staff. It was far from luxurious, just a utilitarian passage. But it was safe. One by one, travelers filed in relief, evident on their faces. The corridor exited near Terminal B's security checkpoint, a safe distance from the threat in Terminal A. TSA officers guided the evacuees forward occasionally, thanking Darnell for knowing about this seldom-used path. Meanwhile, Carter hovered occasionally, glancing at Darnell. He seemed reluctant to admit that the janitor's knowledge and keys had once again proven invaluable. But with adrenaline pumping and his attention split between the evacuation and the potential bomb scare, Carter couldn't do much beyond scowling. Finally, once the last of the evacuees cleared the corridor, TSA sealed it behind them to prevent re-entry. They would wait until the suspicious suitcase was investigated. Darnell and Carter stood in a small administrative lobby, watching the crowd file into Terminal B. "You knew about that corridor," Carter said, his voice heavy with grudging respect. "And you had the key." Darnell nodded too, drained to pass Carter's tone. "It's part of my job to know these things." Carter said nothing more, turning on his heel to confer with the TSA officers. Darnell exhaled, feeling the weight of the crisis fade. The suitcase later turned out to be a forgotten bag of a harried traveler, containing clothes and a laptop, thankfully not an explosive device. The airport reopened Terminal A soon after. Another crisis had been averted with Darnell's help. Though the suitcase crisis ended peacefully, it deepened a strange tension swirling in Carter's gut. Each new event underscored how important Darnell's role was, how the janitor possessed not just keys, but a near-encyclopedic knowledge of the airport. Carter had joined security, dreaming of being the hero, the gatekeeper who saved the day. But time and again, it was Darnell who stepped in with the practical solution. A simmering jealousy churned inside Carter. He told himself it wasn't about race or envy. He was just doing his job. Yet in quiet moments, a darker truth niggled at the edges of his mind, that he couldn't stomach being overshadowed by a black janitor, especially one who, in Carter's eyes, got too much credit. One fateful afternoon, Carter reached his boiling point. He overheard a group of staff praising Darnell for his unbelievable knowledge of the airport, and how even security leans on him in a crisis. Carter felt his blood pressure spike. In a rage-induced haze, he stalked through the hallways, eventually spotting Darnell polishing the floor near a lesser-used exit. Carter's footsteps thundered as he approached. Darnell, picking up on the sudden aggression, straightened. He tensed, anticipating another confrontation. "All right, I've had enough," Carter roared, ignoring startled passers-by. "You walk around like you own the place, always meddling in everyone's business." He jabbed a finger at Darnell's chest. "Acting like you're some superhero just because you carry keys." Darnell's eyes narrowed. He set aside his mop bucket. "I don't claim to be a superhero. I do what's needed and I help where I can." Carter let out a derisive laugh. "That's your excuse, right? Always barging into restricted areas, snooping around with your big ring of keys. Maybe I should detain you right now. Search you for any contraband. I bet you've got something hidden." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Ms. Jenkins, alerted by the commotion, rushed to the scene. She placed herself between Carter and Darnell, arms raised protectively. "That's enough, Carter," she ordered. "You're out of line. Step away from him." Carter sneered. He's gotten away with too much already. Maybe it's time someone put him in his place. Ms. Jenkins rounded on Carter, her voice trembling with indignation. "Put him in his place? He's been here longer than you've even known this airport existed. He keeps the heart of this place beating, cleaning, unlocking, fixing, directing, assisting in emergencies. You think you have more authority just because of your uniform? You've done nothing but cause trouble since you arrived." Darnell's pulse thundered, but he remained silent, letting Ms. Jenkins' words fill the corridor. Onlookers murmured in agreement, some nodding, others glaring at Carter. In the charged silence that followed, Carter seemed to realize he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. The hateful glare he gave Darnell was laced with a final desperate bitterness. Then with a huff, he spun on his heel and stomped away, leaving Ms. Jenkins to comfort a visibly shaken Darnell. Ms. Jenkins reported the incident to upper management and the chief of security. It was not the first complaint lodged against Carter. He had a file of minor infractions and altercations with both co-workers and passengers. But this time he had blatantly threatened and harassed a long-standing employee in front of witnesses. An investigation was swift. Testimonies from various staff members recounted Carter's ongoing harassment of Darnell. The false accusations, the public confrontations, and the racially charged comments. Even some security colleagues admitted that Carter had spoken ill of Darnell behind closed doors, questioning his moral character with no real evidence. To top it off, the latest confrontation was well documented by staff and bystander cell phones. Footage showed Carter's aggressive posture, the finger-jabbing, the vile expression. It also captured Darnell standing calmly, Ms. Jenkins intervening, and the crowd's supportive reaction. A week later, Carter was summoned to a disciplinary hearing in the main administrative office. Darnell was asked to provide a statement along with Ms. Jenkins and other witnesses. The hearing was thorough, with HR personnel questioning each party about the events leading up to the altercation. Carter tried to deny wrongdoing, claiming Darnell had been insubordinate and suspicious, but his words rang hollow against the amassed evidence. Finally, the verdict came. Carter was terminated for harassment, misconduct, and creating a hostile work environment. He was escorted out of the airport by two of his now former colleagues in a grim twist of poetic justice. Word spread quickly. For the first time in a place where thousands pass each day, staff from every corner, pilots, gate, agents, janitors, baristas, whispered the same message security guard who yelled at the black janitor. He got fired. In the days following Carter's dismissal, Darnell tried to process his emotions. There was relief. Certainly, relief that the harassment would no longer plague him. There was also a semblance of justice, a validation that he had not imagined or exaggerated the guard's hateful behavior. But there was also a sense of sadness. Darnell had never wanted someone to lose their job. He knew what it felt like to rely on a paycheck. Still, Carter had dug his own grave by perpetuating false accusations and open hostility. Life at the airport settled into a more peaceful rhythm. Darnell continued his duties, receiving more nods and smiles from staff who had heard about his ordeal. Some openly thanked him for his calm demeanor and apologized that he had to endure such prejudice. Ms. Jenkins, proud yet protective, reminded Darnell that his job was secure and that he should report any future harassment immediately. Ironically, Carter's dismissal underscored a deeper truth. Everyone in this airport is vital. Even if society ranks some as lowly janitors and others as security officers, each role is critical for success. When one person tries to diminish another, especially for biased reasons, they destabilize the very environment they're supposed to uphold. In a final triumphant twist, the airport's official newsletter published a short feature on Darnell's crucial role during the Terminal D power crisis. The article included a quote from Ms. Jenkins praising his expertise, loyalty, and kindness. It concluded by stating that a cohesive team, respectful of each member's contributions, is the backbone of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Weeks after Carter's firing, the airport hosted a team spirit barbecue to promote unity. Staff from all departments gathered, including Darnell Casual, relaxed and finally seen. He laughed with electricians, shared stories with flight attendants, and realized how many people he'd quietly impacted over the years. Jeff Morse joked, "Let's meet over burgers, not blackouts." In that sunny park, Darnell felt something rare, true belonging. No threats, no stares, just respect. Carter's memory faded, replaced by a renewed culture of support. Darnell knew the airport was changing for the better, and for once he didn't feel invisible. After his firing, Carter's life unraveled. Word spread about his misconduct, and no security firm would hire him. Resentment festered as he blamed Darnell for his downfall, ignoring his own actions. Eventually, Carter took a job as a parking lot attendant near the airport, watching the very planes he once guarded. Each passing jet reminded him of what he'd lost. People still whispered. The guard who yelled at the janitor. He got what he deserved. Carter, once puffed up with authority, now sat in a booth, forgotten bitter, and surrounded by the consequences he created. Months later, on a rare day off, Darnell pulled into a rental car lot to pick up a relative. As he approached the booth, he froze behind the glass, sat Carter, the former security guard, now reduced to a parking attendant. Their eyes met. Carter looked away, face tight with shame. "How much?" Darnell asked softly. $10, Carter muttered, not meeting his gaze. Darnell handed him the money with a polite nod. "Have a good day." Carter barely mumbled a reply. Driving off, Darnell felt no triumph, just a quiet, humbling peace. Carter had once tried to strip him of dignity. Now fate had handed Carter a mirror, and Darnell, still holding his keys, had moved on stronger, wiser, unbothered. Driving onto the highway, Darnell replayed the chance encounter with Carter. There was no smug satisfaction, only quiet reflection. Carter, once swaggering with power, was now reduced to scanning tickets in a booth, while Darnell had kept his dignity and earned genuine respect. At home, Darnell told his wife about the run-in. She listened, then softly said, "Sometimes karma finds its own way." He nodded. "I don't hate him. I just hope he learns something." That night, as planes streaked overhead in the dark sky, Darnell realized something deeper. The real victory wasn't Carter's fall, but the unwavering support Darnell had gained from his colleagues. His keys had opened doors in more ways than one, proving that resilience, humility, and doing right could quietly outlast prejudice and pride. Darnell's quiet heroism became legend at Hartsfield-Jackson. He was now the go-to mentor for new janitors, teaching not just tasks, but how to move with dignity even under pressure. His keys weren't just tools, they were symbols of trust. The airport embraced change. Management launched new policies promoting teamwork and respect. Security staff were retrained to see every role as vital. Cultural sensitivity workshops became mandatory. Darnell kept doing what he'd always done, working hard, staying humble. But now each hallway he walked echoed with recognition. He wasn't just the janitor with the keys. He was the steady force that helped hold the airport together. Through storms, crises, and conflict, Darnell proved that even those overlooked can become pillars of strength. His legacy wasn't loud, but it was lasting. As the years passed, Darnell remained a steady presence at the airport. He trained new recruits with patience, teaching them not just where keys fit, but how to carry themselves with pride and resilience. He rarely spoke of Carter, choosing instead to share stories of teamwork and kindness. When Ms. Jenkins retired, she called Darnell the soul of the airport, thanking him for years of quiet leadership. A new supervisor took over, continuing the culture of respect Darnell helped nurture. He became a mentor to many, embodying humility and strength. To the world, he was still a janitor. But to those who worked beside him, he was the backbone of their community, steady-wise and deeply respected. On his 20th work anniversary, Darnell found a surprise invitation in his locker, a celebration in his honor. At the staff lounge, employees from all departments gathered, janitors, technicians, managers, all there for him. Airport manager Alicia Perez praised Darnell's legacy, joking that his keys were more valuable than the official master set. When he stepped up to accept his plaque, the applause was overwhelming. Darnell spoke briefly, reminding everyone that unity and respect keep the airport running. Though thousands of travelers would never know his name, those who worked beside him did. Darnell had become more than a janitor. He was a quiet guardian. And Carter. A forgotten warning of what hate can cost. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through the corridors and hidden passages of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. We witnessed the quiet determination of a janitor named Darnell, someone most folks would overlook, who time and again stepped up to rescue the day. From a near-catastrophic power failure to a tense security evacuation, his keys were more than metal. They were symbols of trust, responsibility, and unwavering compassion. And in the end, the one who tried to tear him down suffered a swift, hard lesson in the power of karma. If Darnell's story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Spread his message far and wide that every job holds dignity. Every person is integral, and respect will always triumph over hate. Let's work together to ensure more folks like Darnell get the recognition they truly deserve. Thank you for watching.